Hello and welcome to the Elephant Lounge. I'm your host Tuesday, and I want to thank you so much for joining me. And we are back for the second episode of Why Are They Guilty? Now, in the first episode, I talked to you, have to be able to identify propaganda. Propaganda is going to be biased in nature, obviously. We know that just because something is biased doesn't necessarily mean it's untrue. First, we have to look at what they're telling us, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, what aren't they telling us? And that will be a good place for us to begin our research. We want to look up answers to the questions that we have, the stuff that they didn't tell us. We want to consider the statements that they're giving us. Any type of declarative statement that they're throwing out as a fact. Is it something that they've proven? Are they going to give us facts about how they arrived at that conclusion? In many cases, they will not do that. We also found that there's a lot of imagery that's used. We saw the position right away with Wade swearing in and then lies written on top of him. We saw the headlines ripped from the headlines. We see the documents flashed on the screen, but they don't actually tell you where those documents are from. All right, and in the next episode, we'll go ahead and follow up with the rest of this. And I'll be back. Hello and welcome back to the Elephant Lounge. I'm your host Tuesday. I want to thank you so much for joining me again. And we are in episode 3 of a series called Why Are They Guilty? And please keep in mind that this series will be cumulative, so we will be building upon one thing after the next. In this case, we are going back to an example of propaganda, which is called Lies of Leaving Neverland. And we are going to pick up where we left off and basically do the same thing I was doing before, pointing out the elements of propaganda and some of the strategies that are used in propaganda and how to think about this information and what questions we should be asking. Now, we left off with complaints about deceptive editing. Interestingly enough, they never really explained why this editing was somehow deceptive. They merely proved that the documentary was shot and then a pickup shot was done later on. Okay. And this is deceptive how? Pretty much every production that's ever done in front of a camera is going to have cuts and takes and reshots and pickup shots. There's nothing exactly shocking or weird about this. It doesn't change his story. It doesn't change anything that happened to him. If it's so deceptive, then surely they would be able to tell us how it's being deceptive. What is it about that is so deceptive? What's the manipulation here? We don't have an answer to that, but they're going to complain about it anyway. So let's go ahead and get back to where we were before.
The staged sequence at the end of Leaving Neverland, showing Wade Robson burning Michael Jackson items, is misleading to the point of fakery. That's because Robson sold his most valuable Michael Jackson memorabilia in 2011 for nearly $100,000. Needing money, he consigned all items to Julian's auction and tried to remain anonymous. But Julian's auctions wouldn't agree, tweeting, "Wade asked to remain anonymous and said that he did not want anyone to know that it was him selling the items in 2011. But we did not agree to that and listed it as the Wade Robson collection. He consigned multiple items and wanted us to sell all items of his that had value."
Okay, so this is what I call damned if you do, damned if you don't. So the accusation itself doesn't really match the reality. Wade burned some makeshift costumes and old albums at the end of the show. And again, not really a big deal. It's just a symbolic scene where he's going through the personal things that he had that reminded him of Michael Jackson and burning them. And then he sold his valuable memorabilia, and they prove it was sold under his name. So there's There's no hiding that. Maybe he wanted it hidden. That's fine. I don't know the reason. He hasn't given a reason for that, if that's the case. I suppose you could ascribe something sinister to that, but I'm not sure exactly what. And meanwhile, the same people who criticize James for keeping his rings are the same people who are going to get upset about Wade selling his memorabilia. You want to make sure that your criticisms don't contradict one another. And this is something that propaganda will do often. They will make a criticism and then hold an internally inconsistent criticism elsewhere. So if you're criticizing James for keeping his rings because that somehow makes him a weirdo, as Ziggy Jackson would claim, which still irritates me, by the way, if you're somehow going to criticize someone for keeping their memorabilia, then why would you then criticize the other victim for selling their memorabilia? Why not just understand that people are very different? Some people keep things because they're sentimental or because it's very hard for them to deal with something. Other people get rid of things. You can care about people and get rid of things. There are all sorts of different people in this world. This sort of criticism is not only inconsistent, but it's also kind of making a mountain out of a molehill. Again, everybody's very different in how they deal with things or how they handle memorabilia. Some people just don't care about that stuff in general, and some people are extremely sentimental. You're taking something that's kind of benign and turning it into something sinister or awful. You're trying to ascribe something to that action. That's what they're trying to do here. And in reality, it doesn't change the fact that they were molested by Michael Jackson. It doesn't change anything. They're still victims. The fact that they had this memorabilia is evidence Michael Jackson and James, or Michael Jackson and Wade, were close enough that they were given these valuable items. That's what it proves.
Leaving Neverland fails to mention Wade Robson has been looking to make money by shopping for a lucrative book deal, unsuccessfully, about the allegations in the year prior to his lawsuit. Leaving Neverland also fails to mention that when writing it, Robson could recall so few details in 2012 about his story with Michael Jackson, the same details he remembers with such supposed precision in Leaving Neverland, that he had to ask his mother by email to help him fill in the blanks.
Did you ever ask your mother for any written materials to help you write your book?
I think along the same lines, but maybe I would ask her, of a certain period of time, could you just jot down the bullet points of what you remember? Asking my mother that, of how the details of when we went to the ranch and the first time, and just how did that unfold, the external details.
So have your memories changed as you've gone through that process?
They've evolved.
What do you mean by evolved?
Yeah, not changed in a sort of black to white sense. Like I thought it was this thing. Well, they have as far as prior to the healing process, right? Prior to disclosing. But post-disclosing the abuse in 2012 and beginning that healing journey, they've evolved as far as I remember more details about scenarios as it goes along. It evolves, details get added to.
And in the last episode 2, I already covered the topic of memories. There's nothing here that Wade is describing that is inconsistent with what we already know about the memory. When you go back and you're trying to retrieve a story from your past, it is very common that you're going to remember the main elements of that story, and then after a certain amount of time, maybe even during your conversation, or maybe a week from then, or a month, you begin to think to yourself, oh, wait a minute, I forgot about this. This is what happened. That's how memories work. They do not happen in some linear fashion where everything just somehow is remembered in perfect order and detail. That's not how memories work. You remember the main element, and then after thinking or talking about something for a while, you will start to remember extra details around that situation. You'll start to remember things. You'll remember what happened before, what happened after, after, and nothing he said is inconsistent. And we also have to remember that we have an element of abuse on top of somebody trying to remember something when they were 7, 8, 9 years old. Those are very hard memories to retrieve as it is. Now adding the element of abuse on top of that is going to be even more difficult. It's one thing to sort of remember something that happened in high school because at least it's a little bit closer, but to remember stuff when you're very little like that, that's very difficult to do. Nothing shocking here. They're taking something that is basically natural and they're trying to turn it into something sinister. They're trying to ascribe a motive for a natural process. It's very bizarre. It's very dishonest. This is an element that happens among any propagandist piece. This is a common element found in propaganda, which is taking something that is common and trying to turn it into something that's wrong or bad or evil.
Wade Robson was one of the witnesses who eagerly testified for Michael Jackson in 2005. Robson had his family claim in Leaving Neverland it was at a Neverland dinner the night before Robson testified in Michael Jackson's 2005 criminal trial that he became convinced that he needed to lie on the stand the next day to save him. Except, according to Jackson family members, that dinner actually took place after Wade testified. He also claims in the film he had to testify because he was subpoenaed.
Then you have his constantly changing story about how he came to testify in 2005 for Michael Jackson's defense, beginning with, I didn't realize I'd been abused, and then morphing into, well, I did know I'd been abused, but I didn't want to be responsible for orphaning his children, so I decided to testify in his defense, and then morphing into, I was threatened and bullied by Michael Jackson and his lawyers. So that story keeps changing. There are massive problems with his story, to the point where you could take any one of those issues that I've just listed, and that would be sufficient grounds on which to say, this guy has problems with his story. You cannot believe it beyond a reasonable doubt. But when you add it all together, it's catastrophically damaging.
Jackson's attorney, Tom Mesereau, who says he doesn't believe Michael Jackson was a molester for 5 seconds, said Robson never wavered during the trial and how adamant he was that Michael was innocent.
He was very, very strong in his defense of Michael Jackson. He told me in no uncertain terms he had not been molested, he had not been abused, and that these claims were ridiculous. This man was so strongly supportive of Michael Jackson, so powerful in his defense of Michael Jackson, that it just shocks me that he's changed his story in recent years. I just can't get over it.
Mesereau also says Wade Robson's claim in Leaving Neverland that he was subpoenaed and forced to testify in the 2005 trial is simply not true. So does defense investigator Scott Ross.
As far as making anybody testify, I would love for Wade Robson to show me the subpoena he never got.
When pressed in a deposition, Robson could not provide any specifics about his alleged subpoena.
Do you recall being subpoenaed for the criminal testimony in 2005?
I do.
Do you recall where you were when you were subpoenaed?
I don't.
Do you recall if you were with anyone when you were subpoenaed?
I don't remember how I got the subpoena.
This is a transcript of your testimony from the 2005 criminal trial, correct?
It appears to be that way.
Robson now claims he committed the crime of perjury on the witness stand in 2005, even as skeptics point to the rigorous cross-examination he was subjected to.
On line 18, you're asked, Mr. Robson, did Michael Jackson ever molest you at any time? And you said, absolutely not, correct?
Correct.
And that was a lie, right?
That was a lie, yeah.
Okay. On line 21, you're asked, Mr. Robson, did Michael Jackson ever touch you in a sexual way? And you responded, never, no, correct?
Correct.
And that was a lie, correct?
That was what I had rehearsed with Michael.
And you now claim that that was a lie, correct?
That was not the truth, yeah.
On line 24, you're asked, Mr. Robson, has Mr. Jackson ever inappropriately touched any part of your body at any time, correct?
Correct.
And your answer was no, correct?
Correct.
And you now claim that that was a lie, correct?
That was not the truth.
You turn to page 9100. On line 14, you were